Welcome everyone to the Power of Perspective webinar. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and the deck and the link to the recording will be sent out to all participants. Second, we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them in the Q&A section. Our wonderful host, Nick Ellinger, will monitor the questions and will address them after we've taken you through our initial thoughts and toolkit. It is my great pleasure to introduce IKyla Shawyer. I met IKyla about 5 years ago when our company was going through a time of transition. IKyla worked with our leadership team to help us do the hard work of getting through the transition. She's a passionate professional who drives those that she works with to lead with innovation. I consider her a mentor and I'm always glad to partner with her. Through her work with Philanthropy and Fundraising North America, she's bringing that expertise and passion to other nonprofits. So thank you, IKyla, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Bessie. It's my great pleasure to introduce my co-host, Bessie Thibodeaux. And Bessie, you are such a thoughtful, compassionate leader. You're always looking to bring innovative solutions to teams and clients that you serve. And you navigate complex situations with grace and calm. You're always willing to step up and take on a challenge, which is really why we're here doing this webinar today. What I would say is Bessie's experience leading teams through growth and change at both a nonprofit and now with more really brings a unique perspective to the nonprofit clients that she now serves. So Bessie and I initially created an interactive version of this session for the Bridge conference earlier this month. And so we're going to be sharing some of the tools, the insights that we use there so that you can apply them in your organizations. Now, we'd love to thank you all for joining us, and we're actually going to kick things off an interactive poll. So Nick, if you could please help us facilitate this. We're going to take a quick read here. Here we go. Here's the poll come up. If you could answer the questions, how often do you feel a change in perspective can kickstart innovation? Always, often, sometimes, never? How often do you feel a change in perspective is a critical leadership skill? Always, often, sometimes, never? And how often do you feel that your perspective is reality? That is quite a juicy, perhaps even philosophical one. And then Nick, if you could share with us the answers when we get them, that would be fantastic. Oh, here we go. So everybody to some extent feels that a change in perspective can kickstart innovation. That's really great to see. Some always believe it, sometimes for, a number of people there, but the majority are oftentimes, which is great. So how often do you feel a change in perspective is a critical leadership skill? So we have a much higher vote there for always, about 53% feel that it is a critical leadership skill. Oh, I love this one. How often do you feel that your perspective is reality? Yeah, so just a few people feel, no, my perspective is reality, and then often, sometimes, and never.
Everybody wants that middle.
Right. Well, we love that. Thank you so much. We just wanted to get kind of temperature in the room of where things sit. The truth is that embracing different perspectives really has the power to transform the way that we see the world. It opens up new ideas and ways of thinking, which in turn can lead to personal growth and a better understanding of others. So let's just orient ourselves for our time today. We're going to take a look at what is perspective, Why is it important to embrace new perspectives? And then share a selection of tools that we found can really help to unearth different perspectives. And these can be used for problem solving, for innovation at work with your teams, and even in your personal lives. So over to you, Bessie, to kick us off.
Okay, thanks, Kyla. Before we can even talk about the power of perspective and leadership, we need to really understand what perspective is. It's a way of thinking about and understanding something, a point of view. Your perspective is not right or wrong. It's just your point of view. Some people will say that their perspective is their reality. We saw just a few people said that. But while that's true, it's not the full picture. We really need to understand perspectives from other views and other people's perspectives to get the reality of the situation. And we know that depending on where you are in life, time, your role, you'll have different lenses that shape your perspective. What we're going to do now is take a look at what shapes or what helps shapes our perspectives.
Oftentimes, our perspectives on things can be skewed by our own biases and expectations. So we might expect a certain outcome when we look at an event or a situation because of what we think should happen based on a previous experience we may have had.
Our values can shape our experiences. They get at the why of why we view our situations in a certain way. When we answer questions like, what do I think is important? Or how do I envision a world that is at its best? Those really help us come to define our values. If I value people above money, when I look at solutions, I'm going to look at the impact on people and profitability. What if I value independence? That might shape how I manage or mentor my teams.
Judgments. Well, our judgments are formed from past experiences and future fears, not present truths. So sometimes it's really hard to embrace a new perspective because we've got into the habit of allowing judgments to control us. When we're rigid and stuck in our ways, we have a much harder time seeing possibilities, and more likely we aren't looking for them either. It's very hard to see new perspectives if you aren't open to them. Now, judgment is a valid practice. We are used to assessing our situations and forming opinions based on previous experiences. But when we allow judgment to take the wheel, we're letting go of a lot of control and opportunity. And the problem with judgments is that they often result in instant decisions without clearly paying attention to the whole picture of what is actually happening now. Be discerning, but let go of judgment. As leaders, we need to be open to what's happening now. There is a whole world of possibilities that open up to us if we're able to get curious, if we're able to explore and let go of preconceived judgments and allow new discoveries to present themselves.
Information is key, right? We know that the information we have access to can drive our perspectives and conclusions about a situation or a challenger. As a manager, if I have an employee who's always late with their work, and I'm told that they're late because they really don't understand the project, well, then my solution might be to do some more training around that project. But what if I'm told they're late because they're just procrastinating? That's going to drive a different solution to the problem. So it's really important that we look at all the information that we can gather, and back to Kyla's point, be a little bit discerning about the information that we have.
Our needs can also shape our perspective. Our natural inclination is always to see things through the narrow lens of our own needs, right? Yet, one of the greatest leadership skills is empathy, the ability to understand another person's thoughts and feelings in a situation from their point of view rather than just your own. And as a leader, think about how the ability to adopt an empathetic perspective would make it easier to understand, communicate, and connect with employees, strengthen your bonds, and boost performance of the team too.
Oh, I love this one, desires. I have a vision of what my world should be, what my life should be. And that vision, those desires that drive that vision, they impact the way I see every situation. And it's critical to always ask ourselves the question, How am I letting my desires or my wants impact the lens through which I look at the world? Now, we've looked at some things that shape our perspective. Let's move on to some skills that we can use in perspective and leadership. The first one is perspective taking, which really means that you can look at a situation from another's point of view. That's not a talent that everybody has, right? But let's take a moment to think about this a little more and put this in practice. Imagine that you are in a new role at your company. So right now, if you're a manager, pretend you're a team member. If you're a team member, pretend you're a manager. And then ask yourself these questions. In this role, what do I want? What do I fear? To me, that's a really important question. What do I fear? How would you answer those questions differently if you were in another role? Perspective taking helps us look both backwards and forwards. Helps us look back and see, how did we get to where we are? What were some roadblocks? What were some successes that we had? But it also supports us in making decisions about the solutions to the situation that we're in currently. The second skill is, after you have the ability to take other people's perspective, is to actually go seek them out, right? Like, it's not just about being able to do it. You actually have to go look for those other perspectives. It's about being curious, asking questions, and really wanting to learn what other people are thinking, feeling, fearing. Now, there's a trap to watch out for when you go perspective seeking. If you're like me, you can live in an echo chamber a little bit, right? Like, we all like the people that agree with us. And so we're going to look for perspective. We can tend to look for perspectives that echo our own. We need to make sure that we're looking for different perspectives. Now, there is a benefit to this skill, and it's a big one. It helps you see potential blind spots and solutions that you're looking at, and it also helps provide new ideas for solutions. Now you know you can take somebody else's perspective, you go seek them. What's next? It's perspective coordinating. It's using these perspectives to drive solutions, right? You're coordinating and utilizing these different points of view. So how does that work, right? It might help you in looking at, how does this impact other people, right? You've heard their perspective come into that. It might help you communicate the solution or communicate the ideas that you have around the solution, because you can know what's important to them as you've listened to them. Another big benefit of perspective coordinating is it can really help you see how big or limited somebody's perspective is. And it might help you decide, I need to share some information so that they can have a bigger perspective of the situation that we're facing.
The fact is that when we make space for different perspectives, it allows us to see the broader context, impact of decisions, and really the big picture, which helps unleash innovation. If we take a look at this at a macro level, the phrase VUCA world was developed about 10 years ago to sum up the massive shift and pace of change happening in the world around us, primarily due to technology. Now, some saw this new VUCA world as volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And these reactions, I'm sure, were valid, but they came out of fear rather than asking the question, what's happening around us that demands creative change? What can we do? How can we view this differently? And those that asked that question, they chose to see the world instead as this super VUCA world, right? Vibrant, unreal, crazy, astounding, all these things. And these are all true. It just depends on how you view things and your perspective as to whether this is a good or a bad thing, and whether this presents a time of fear and challenge or a time of excitement and opportunity. Now, those who saw the opportunity as super VUCA world jumped on that, and we saw a massive surge in new powerhouse companies powered by technology that didn't even exist the decade before. And another example of the power of perspective goes back to ancient Chinese philosophy, We found it fascinating that the word crisis here is made up of two words, danger and opportunity, embracing both perspectives of a situation. In fact, JFK used this in his campaign speeches in 1959 and 1960 to really help get the country to shift to an alternate point of view.
Now, we've seen this one before, and I really like this. The age-old question is the glass half empty or half full? Well, if you say half full, you're often defined as an optimist. And if you say half empty, you're defined as a pessimist. But what's the truth of this picture? It is both half empty and half full. But let's think. And as we see that it's half empty, right, like we can look at changing the question. How do we fill the glass up all the way? It challenges us to be creative and to look for solutions. Always seeing that, oops, sorry. Sorry about that. It challenges us to see the solutions that will help make it half full. And if we see, or I'm sorry, to make it fully full, if we always see it as half full, we can become complacent. We start to feel like, oh, it's half full. That's great, right? Now, don't get me wrong. You do need to be able to see it as half full, because what that also brings is the ability to see what made it half full. What are the solutions that worked in the past? How can we bring that to the empty part and to make our glass full?
So, Bessie, let's have a quick conversation on why perspective is important.
That'd be great, Kyla. You know, by embracing different views, we have the opportunity to expand our horizons and see things from a fresh angle. So we can gain a deeper appreciation of the world and the people around us.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, we live in a world where opinions and beliefs are just constantly clashing. Everywhere we look, it seems like people are honest with each other, unwilling to consider alternative viewpoints. What if we started embracing these differences rather than shunning them? What if we made an effort to really understand where others are coming from, even if we don't agree with their perspective?
You know, Kyla, it's funny. In my previous world, I worked in the political fundraising space. And when I tell people about my, past career, I always say, and I am so glad I'm out of politics. Right now, it's just so crazy. And this, I think, is really at the heart of it. It's easy to fall into that trap of thinking that our perspective is the only correct one. Mm-hmm. But the reality is there are different and countless ways to see the world, and all of them are valid. They come from all those things that we discussed about earlier, our experiences, our information, our desires. And when we embrace these differences, we have the opportunity to learn from others and gain a deeper understanding of the human experience. This can lead to a stronger sense of connection with those around us and a greater appreciation for the diversity of the world.
For sure. And of course, embracing different perspectives isn't always easy, right? It can be uncomfortable to confront our own biases and our beliefs. And it can be challenging to understand the perspective of others too. But I think that's exactly why it's so important. It takes courage to step outside our comfort zones and really engage with the world in new ways. But it's this bravery that leads to true personal growth and understanding. So I think let's go ahead and summarize some of the benefits we see when we have the courage to unleash the power of perspective.
Good.
I mean, to start off, I would say that we can better identify and break through any mental blocks.
Yeah, and we're able to really think about creative solutions to the problems that might have seemed insurmountable before, because we've seen what others are thinking.
Right, that's true. We're also more likely to overcome our fear of failure, because if one plan doesn't work out, then there could be other ways that we could think of.
Mm-hmm. And with a broader outlook comes a greater sense of personal growth, which can lead to improved self-confidence and overall mental well-being, and a belief in a really solid confidence in the solutions you're coming up with.
Yes, I mean, I would say ultimately, by opening up to acceptance and understanding and compassion for ourselves and others, we can really connect on a deeper level to the world around us. So, Bessie, should we share our toolkit that we pulled together?
Yes, this is actually the fun part for us.
So Betsy and I gathered together some of our favorite tools to share with you. And these are things that can really help to prompt or invite alternate perspectives so that you can maximize these benefits and integrate the power of perspective into your work and life goals. All right, I'm going to talk about liberating structures. I discovered liberating structures about 5 years ago, and I really gravitated towards it as a tool to help us invite different perspectives into our workplaces, really to enable us to distribute participation and collaborate more effectively. And essentially, liberating structures is like a menu of alternate ways, tools, and facilitation techniques, if you like, that really make it possible to include and engage everyone in the conversation and tap into the wisdom in the room. And I really mean everyone. I mean, each one of these structures can be used with any size group, from a group as small as 3. I've used them also in a room of 1,000 people. And that sounds really, really far-fetched, but I can say, having used these for the past few years, they can literally transform how people interact and work together.
Okay, so I think when Kyla and I first met, it was on a phone call after she had just done a seminar on liberating structures. I was like, what is she talking about? Well, these exercises are best learned by just jumping in. I really wanted to learn more about what she was talking about. So I bought the book, and honestly, it was really dry up front until you got to the structures. But there was one aspect of the introduction that has always stuck with me, and it was explaining liberating structures in this way. We have alphabets that help us create words, that help us create sentences, paragraphs, and that helps us draw meaning as we talk and create those words and sentences and paragraphs. Well, imagine you had only 5 letters in your alphabet. How many words, how many sentences did you make with this? Not very many. What if I added 5 more letters to your alphabet? You can make a few more words, but how robust are your sentences? Not very. But imagine you have a full alphabet, 26 letters that you can really use to make words and sentences. This is a transformation of how we communicate with one another. And it really helps us open up our world and unleash innovation. You know, a really quick way to see another perspective is to recognize the opposite of whatever you are seeing, thinking, or experiencing. There is duality in everything. So I want to share one of the liberating structures that I've used countless times since I've learned about it. It's called TRIZ. And the desire or the goal of this is to stop counterproductive behaviors to make way for innovation. So let's pretend we run a restaurant and we want, like, our ultimate goal is for this restaurant to succeed. So how would we use TRIZ to ensure that that would happen? Step 1, we would gather the team together. And I'm talking not just the leadership, the manager, I'm talking about the waiters, the bus staff, the chefs, everybody. They all come together and we identify the worst outcome, right? So success of the restaurant is our number 1 priority. What would be the worst possible result, right? The worst possible result, if we own a restaurant, would be that we got horrible reviews. We had to close down because we just had horrible service. And so you start to say, okay, I want to really make that worst case scenario happen. What do I have to do? And you start listing it off. And I know it sounds kind of goofy, but people really get into this and it starts to really roll, right? Like with the ball gets rolling and people are having fun with it, right? So think about the restaurant. What are some bad behaviors? I can tell you the things that annoy me when I go into a restaurant. They take forever to seat me. When I finally get seated, it's another like 10, 15 minutes before I even see a waiter. What if they get my order wrong all the time? What if we're like the restaurant's undercooking food or salting it too much and it's just never right? Those could be some of the behaviors that is listed in step 1. Now, step 2, this can be really a gut punch when you have to do this. You have to be brutally honest, and you have to look at that list of counterproductive behaviors, and you have to say, which ones are we doing? Right? And I gave this example at Bridge, right? Like, and I'm not going to give you the whole example, but there was a time when we went through this exercise, and right, like I expected I was going to look in this mirror and be like, oh, I'm Snow White. And really, when I looked in, I saw her stepmother, and the mirror going, you're not the prettiest, right? Like I was doing a lot of the behaviors that I just identified as ones that could really hurt my team. So you, again, just have to be brutally honest. So let's take it back to the restaurant. If, let's say it is taking us 15 to 20 minutes before we even get orders into the kitchen, that's a problem. What if okay, so that's one that we do. What if, the food's great, right? Like it's always there, but maybe we are charging too much for the food that we do. So that would be another one we circle. And as we've done these, we find that about 50% of the counterproductive behaviors we're actually engaging in. So once you've identified them, then you go on to, okay, now we know we're doing some things that we don't want to do, or we're doing things that would lead to the worst case, right? Not the best case. So how do we stop them? So step 3 of this exercise is looking at the ones that you circled from step 1 and saying, okay, what are the resources we have? What are the solutions we can do? What are the triggers that cause that? So we can come to a place where we're stopping those behaviors. So in the case of the restaurant, let's say we identify that it takes 15 to 20 minutes to get to a table. Maybe if we did wait staff teams in 2, we could have somebody whose job was to really get to the table 5 minutes after they've been seated, and they're taking the orders, ensuring that it's ready to go. Maybe the other staff member is somebody who is there to ensure that the order is correct before it gets taken back to the table. That's how you would use the step 3 to use the identified counter behaviors and come up with solutions.
I mean, it sounds really counterintuitive to take the negative position, but when you do that, that shift in perspective really helps you identify what is going wrong. I love that liberating structure. I think it really illuminates challenges.
And like I said, I've used it a number of times, right? Yeah. It's helped for me a lot with bringing teams together.
That's fantastic. Here's another one. Liberating structures example that I love. It's called wise crowds. Wise crowds make it possible to instantly engage a small or a large group of people in helping one another. And you can set up wise crowds consultation with a small group of 4 or 5 people, or with many small groups simultaneously during a larger gathering. Again, with a group as big as 100 or perhaps even more. This is how it works. Individuals are referred to as clients, and they identify a challenge that they're chewing over, something they may feel blocked on. They have a couple of minutes to describe the challenge and talk freely about it to their wise crowd. They then ask their wise crowd of consultants if they have any clarifying questions. And once those are asked and answers received, the wise crowd gets to work and starts discussing the challenge and any ideas that they have from their perspective. Now, oftentimes the client turns around and just listens to the conversation. And this step, it's really interesting. It actually helps them to really hear the ideas, and it leaves the consultants free to brainstorm. Now, what I love about this is that wise crowds develop people's ability to ask for help. Many of us struggle with that. It also deepens inquiry and consulting skills. It's supportive relationships form very, very quickly, so it can be great for team bonding. And wise crowds consultations also make it easy to achieve transparency. And because it's tapping the expertise and the inventiveness of everyone in the group, individuals actually gain more clarity on their challenge that they're facing, because they now have different perspectives on how to perceive it and even how to tackle it.
What I love about this is that it can be used in teams, but right, you can bring your challenges to an outside group as well, right? Like it doesn't have to be with a group of people that know intimately everything about the situation. It can be used in both scenarios.
Oh, it can be absolutely used with complete strangers too. I've certainly done it at a conference where people have come together, and I've done it amongst different ages too, and that's really fascinating. Often younger people don't feel necessarily that they would have anything to contribute to a challenge that somebody, a more experienced leader may have. But in actual fact, I've seen that there can be some fantastic learning and new perspectives that have really, really helped people to grapple with and come up with different ideas to help figure out their challenges. So liberating structures, if you like, is one body of work. There is an app. You can just go ahead and download the app, Liberating Structures. It has everything on there. There's about 32 structures. It tells you how to do them, and you can literally jump in and start doing them right away. We've also included a link to the website in the material handouts at the end.
And if you want some dry reading, you can get the book on Amazon.
I don't know. I'm not sure I'd recommend getting it. All right. Well, next up is a fantastic tool from Looking at Leadership. Now, this is actually it's a deck of beautiful photo cards that depict hundreds of different images. Now, you can also find your own images online. You can use your own photos. You don't have to go and buy, this specifically. For those of you that may have joined our session at Bridge, you may remember this one and some of the great conversations that followed. So the idea is here that you take a few moments to pause and reflect upon how you view a challenging situation you're facing based on your expectations and biases. Now, this could be a conflict at work. It could be an argument with your partner. It could even be something as simple as managing your own finances. And then you use the image to help you describe that conflict to another person or a teammate or a peer. So here's an example of one of the cards, right? I would look at this and it would probably simulate images of, feeling like I'm walking on a tightrope, meaning that I could lose my balance at any moment. I'm not feeling supported. Perhaps the situation is too tenuous, etc. So the idea is that the image helps you to describe your perspective, your thoughts and your feelings about the challenging situation at hand. And actually, in talking out loud about it to another person, it starts to break down the barrier or the mental blocks that are stopping you from finding a different way to look at the situation.
Next, you select another card. And again, it really doesn't matter what the image is. It's essentially a way for your brain to assess a thought it may not have associated with a challenge and help you think of one or two alternate perspectives that might allow you to gain a clearer perspective or understanding of the problem at hand and what to do about it. So here's one, a toolkit. So how would I use this, right? If I were describing a problem, I might say, I forgot I have all of these resources available to me. I have an operations team. I have a production team. I have a creative team who could come in and help me, that they can be those tools that help me solve this problem that I thought I had to solve, right? So that could be a way of using the toolkit. This is another one that you can use. If I were looking at this one, I would say, especially, I'm really guilty of this. I always feel that I have to have the solution mapped out before I share it out. So I may not even share that there's a problem until I feel like I have it mapped out. Remember that echo chamber we need to be aware of? But this could remind me, hey, you know what? If I bring other people in, we can bring our pieces together, and suddenly those pieces can make music that then becomes a symphony, right? Like, so just a reminder that I don't have to do it all, that I can bring people in and we can really create a solution that works for everyone. Okay, so another fun way to use these cards is to pull up an image and have everyone share what it means to them. So IKyla and I laughed about this when we were doing it. when I saw this, I immediately thought of this story from college. My sister's mother-in-law, Becca, every semester would give me a couple $100 for books. And every semester I would thank her. And one time Becca told me, and I'm going to use her words, so excuse the language. She's like, money is like shit. You pile it up, it stinks. You spread it around, it becomes fertilizer. And so when I see that picture, I think of that story and I think about what can I do to help others to become fertilizer for people.
That's too funny. So when I look at that, I think about the saying, you know, one person's trash is another person's treasure. Or even something like about the circular economy, where, you know, you're able to use somebody's waste as a resource. So you get the general idea, you know, one image can generate many different perspectives. And I don't know, I'm sure if you're, you know, if you're out there looking at this, you have your version of how you would read, you know, that particular card. So just to demonstrate.
Okay. Another tool that we put in here is perspective swap. Really, leaders often can fall into power poisoning and fixate on our own needs, our own desires and ambitions. And really, what can help change that is to get a perspective swap. Where, for example, a CEO might work as a customer service rep for a day, or an HR rep might work in the sales seat for a week. This can help detox leaders from blind spots and, you know, distorted views of what's going on and what's really happening in the workplace. And I think this would be a really good movie or TV show. I think it actually was. It was Undercover Boss. And I don't know if you ever saw it, but it was a really good show that, yes, I know it's fake, right? Like all reality TV is, but it did show that, you know, bosses were learning, what are my employees facing in the day-to-day, and what are some solutions I can bring to the table to help them now that I really see the impact of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that perspective swaps, you know, really foster a culture of innovation and empowerment, and that leads to better outcomes for everyone involved. Okay, so you've pulled up here, the 6 hats. So you think about your instinctive approach to decision making, right? If you are naturally optimistic, then chances are that you don't always consider the potential downsides to a decision. Similarly, if you are very cautious, you might not focus on the opportunities that could open up. And it's interesting how these play out in certainly in nonprofits and the different cultures that exist in nonprofit organizations here. But whatever your gut tells you, right, the best decisions usually come after you've explored several ways of viewing a problem. Now, it's easy to feel confused if you try to consider multiple angles all at once, and things can get even more complicated and sometimes even combative if your whole team weighs in with different points of view. So this 6 thinking hats approach was created by Edward de Bono. It's a way of investigating an issue from a variety of perspectives, right? But in a clear, conflict-free way. And it can be used by individuals or groups to move outside their usual ways of thinking, to try out different approaches, and then think constructively about how to move forward. So here's what each of the 6 hats represent. You've got the blue hat, which is the conductor's hat, right? When you or your team are in your blue hat mode, you are focusing on controlling your thinking and managing the decision-making process. So you have an agenda, you ask for summaries, you reach conclusions. When you're in the green hat mode, you're wearing the creative hat. So that green hat then represents creative thinking. You're exploring a range of ideas and possible ways forward. The red hat, we call this the hat for the heart. This is the hat that represents feelings and instincts. And when you're engaged in this type of thinking, you can express your feelings without having to justify them logically. The yellow hat is the optimist hat. With the yellow hat thinking, you look at issues in the most positive light possible. So you accentuate the benefits and the added value that could come from your ideas. Now, the black hat is the judge's hat. And this is the hat about being cautious, assessing risks. You employ critical judgment. You explain exactly why you have concerns. There's a time and a place to use this hat, just like there's a time and a place to use all the hats. So we're allowing all of these different perspectives to be aired without shutting them down immediately. Finally, there's the white hat, which is the factual hat. So the white hat represents information gathering. So think about the knowledge and insights that you've collected already, but also the information you're missing and where you can go and get it. And by the time you have tried out all 6 hats, you should have a rich collection of insights and perspectives that will help you to decide next steps.
And I can imagine that this isn't always easy. I mean, I could live in the emotional space. I could talk about that all day, right? But some of those other hats are a little uncomfortable for me.
Oh,
but,
for sure.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, sometimes it's very difficult to put certain hats on for different people. But if you imagine, if you're sitting around the table and you've got, your leadership areas or departments represented here, imagine your CFO having to wear the creative hat, right? Your fundraising team, your CDMO having to wear the black hat. So, I mean, it really does put a different, a different spin on things. It allows everybody to sit in that space and think about it from that perspective.
I like that visual of it, right? Like really bringing people together as a group. So it doesn't just have to be the leader, figuratively and literally taking off a hat. Like we can challenge each other to think differently.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So another tool that we have for you is disruptive prompts. So this is one that I really like. And, it asks the question, if I were 10 times bolder, what would you do differently? I was telling IKyla and Nick before we started, one of the things that I do before any presentation is I stand in my superhero pose, right? Like to be confident, and it helps open you up and gives you that sense of, I'm coming to save the day. But then we get into the problem sometimes and we like shrink back into our selves of, what if I did that? Like, what would happen? What would the client think? What would my colleagues think? Right? But really think about it. If I were 10 times bolder, what would I do? What would I say to the client when I did something that I didn't think was worth trying out because I thought it would really hurt their program? What would I do if the client was pulling us back and not letting us lead with strategy that I thought would really push them forward? Right? Like you can use this in any situation, and it's just it really helps you to think about it. And if you just write down maybe 2 things that you could do, I think that helps move the solution forward and helps you have that different perspective of how you can solve for the problem.
Well, now finally, you can always use something like a mantra. This is something that you might want to repeat frequently to yourself to get into the habit, or to remind yourself that, the next time a challenging situation presents itself, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to make a conscious choice to meet it with curiosity or humor, or even the knowledge that this too shall pass. So I would say, to sum up, the power of perspective really shouldn't be underestimated, right, Bessie? I mean, by embracing different views, by really making an effort to understand the perspective of others, we can open ourselves up to a world of growth and possibility. So the next time you're faced with a differing viewpoint, take a deep breath, try and understand where the other person is coming from.
That's right, IKyla. And, you never know what you might learn. And you might just find that your own perspective expands in the process. Now, remember, understanding other people's perspectives doesn't mean that you have to agree with their point of view. It just allows you to see that bigger picture. So it's so critical as a leader, as a colleague, as a friend, as a partner in life. All of these areas can really grow and flourish by using the power of perspective. Now, we put together some resources that we've used for this presentation, and that will be the last part of the deck that will be sent out. But I think it's time for some questions and comments. Nick, I don't know if you had any that you want to share with us.
Well, first things first, it's noted in the chat that Bessie's birthday is this week, so happy birthday to Bessie.
Thank you.
So now everyone knows.
Yep. I
and
love
then-
birthdays, so thank you.
No problem. And then question about, and you talked about this a little bit in terms of switching roles. Other ways that you can use in these types of discussions to dismantle or defuse power relationships in these types of discussions?
The switching roles, I think, is good. You know, I think even understanding another liberating structure that we used with the president of our company one time was like a celebrity interview. And right, like it's a person like just asking questions, and it helped see the personal side of this person, right? And it helped like make it more of a colleague relationship as opposed to president, the person that, you know, they oversee. So that's one example I can think of. Kyla, I don't know if you have some.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially what liberating structures is designed to do. It's to kind of level the playing field because it brings all voices into the conversation. So I think there are some structures in there, and I'm looking at the chart now and I'm trying to think of one offhand, but that would definitely in situations where you wouldn't normally be asking people their opinions, it enables you to get in a very kind of constructive way the opinions of other people, that the perspectives of other people. It enables you to gather them in a very quick and constructive fashion. And I think it's done in a very engaging way, but it also enables people across the organization to have a voice. And very often in our organizations, it's just leadership that tends to have the voice, and that really creates that power imbalance.
And that's why I think it's such a critical leadership skill, right? Like it's our job to go out and seek perspectives and to not, like I said, not to just make judgments about those perspectives right away, using what we want their perspectives to be, but to really listen, to go at it with a sense of curiosity. And that is just, it's really critical to ensuring that you can come up with solutions that help your group or your team move forward. And I know, right, like trust is a big part of being able to do this. And so that's another aspect of any type of leadership, is really building trust. And that could be a whole nother seminar or webinar on itself.
And you've talked about some situations in which you are going in sometimes from the outside, sometimes from the inside into these situations. How do you deal with, there's always the history that has occurred between people, sometimes bad blood, sometimes fraught relationships. How do you deal with that in the context of trying to get to the new relationship past that?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, and if you're talking about like Nick, perhaps, you know, at a work perspective, ultimately, you would hope that everybody is working towards a bigger purpose, right? So I think bringing back that perspective, why are we here? Why is it, why am I, what is important about the work that I am doing? How could we kind of bring that up to its highest purpose so that we can just set our sights around, okay, and especially, you know, all of us here work with nonprofit organizations, and we've worked in nonprofit organizations. And when we think about all of the friction that can happen in a nonprofit organization, if we stand back and we say to ourselves, we're trying to solve one of the biggest problems in the world here. There are people that need our help, or animals that need our help. Pulling back up to that purpose and then starting from there, I think, is a really good way to get everybody back on the same page.
And I found, right, like there have been tensions and times where I've had to build like that trust and understanding among teams. And that's where I've used TRIZ a lot. And the reason I use that one is because I found really that a lot of times the tensions that are happening aren't necessarily because you've got two bad people or you've got a bad person who's trying to do anything. It's because you have passionate people who really care and they're trying to do the best job that they can. And so if you can put that that goal that you don't want to attain up there, and then really look at those behaviors, it can really open your eyes to, wait a second, I can look at people in a different way and maybe understand that it's not because they're, they're wrong or they're bad or they just have it out for me or they just don't like me, but maybe it's because their passion's driving us, and we can come to that conclusion together as we look at those behaviors.
I think also, Bessie, some of the conversations that come out allow each other to, again, see the other person's point of view, and it may be something that they hadn't considered at all. A situation that they're viewing as something that is negative, or maybe, just not constructive. It may actually be as a result of technology. It could be as a result of, not understanding where the accountability lies. It could be any number of things. And so when you're able to have a tool that helps promote those honest, more open conversations, then you can actually get to the bottom of what is driving that behavior.
The 9 whys might be a good one for this kind of exercise too. And I think about Simon Sinek's The Power of Why, right? Like he's talking about missions for organizations or for companies, but the 9 whys of why do you want to do it this way? Why? Like keep digging deeper. The why. So you answer that why. Ask the next why. Why this? Why that? Keep going with the why so you really get at the heart of the issue, and you might discover that there's a solution there.
Then you were talking about perspective taking and honoring that other person's perspective. How do you handle that perspective when that perspective is a judgment?
It's hard, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie, right? And if we were perfect at it, this world would be a much better place. I think, right, like when you're looking at the perspectives that other people have, it's just remembering I'm looking, or I'm trying to take it so I can understand why, right? And if that perspective is a judgment, what is the information that I might be able to provide to them that could help expand their perspective, right? And you may not ever get to the point where you agree, and that's just a reality of the world we live in and of the human experience. But these tools will help us to do a better job of trying to get at a better solution and to see the value that each person brings when we have these discussions, if we never really agree with them.
Those are the questions that I have.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've definitely enjoyed pulling this presentation together, the toolkit together. As we said, it's interesting doing this on a webinar because we would ordinarily be doing this like in person, and there might be a room of us, and so we'd actually be doing these activities, but hopefully we've given you enough of a feel so that you will go away and perhaps try some of these things yourselves in your own organizations, or even in your own personal lives too.
And I'll speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure IKyla would agree. If you have any questions or want to understand how you might make this work with a situation or in your organization, please feel free to reach out to us. We are both passionate about this. So we love to do this. So we're glad to help or answer any other questions that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will have our, I think there's a slide in here, right, Bessie, with our contact information too. So
I believe so.
Right. So please, do feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to talk more about this and anything to do with liberating structures too. Thank you so much. Nick, thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.